the BBG can do for you, but what you can do for the BBG. Support The Richie Allen Show now at richieallen.co.uk.
Right, my guest this hour was born on the east coast of the United States. He's a successful businessman who spent a few years in New York at a comedy club there. He hosted a conspiracy comedy show, and it was while he was doing that fans came up to him and they said, Dave, do us a favour, why don't you look into the flat earth theory? And Dave thought it was ridiculous, and he said, don't be stupid, man, that's just a load of old baloney. But he started to look into it himself in an attempt to disprove it, okay, and to put it to bed once and for all, and found that he couldn't. He's very well known, much sought after guest on podcasts and radio shows. Let's welcome to the programme David Weiss, Flat Earth Dave. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Richie, thank you for having me. I've been listening to you on and off for years, and you are a warrior for what's going on in the world right now. And, the things that your listeners will be thinking right now is, why the heck is Richie even entertaining the idea of flat Earth with all this other important stuff with the lethal injection that's going on? And I'm going to show you why this is equally as important. I could talk about that, the lethal injection with you all day long, but we only have a little bit of time.
Yeah, let's get into it. But by the way,
I want to.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
I can't claim, or nobody can claim to be an open door platform or a free speech platform if you don't listen to your, listeners, and if they ask you to speak about a subject. It was never taboo here, Flat Earth. It's just I've been a straight news guy for years. I cover straight news events. I tried to pick them apart. That's why I've not gotten too deep into it. But I'm glad you're here, pal. You're welcome here. I just want to have a tiny bit of fun with you just before we start talking about Flat Earth. Something that I was sent by one of your supporters. And they said, Richie, you better watch out for this Dave guy. He doesn't think very highly of the Irish. Let me just play this for you now, see what you think.
You know what's funny? Something's happened in Ireland. Every time I talk to Ireland guys, no offense to you whatsoever, but they're the dumbest fucking idiots.
What?
I should send you. I should send you.
Oh my God!
I have some clips of these Irish guys. It'll blow you away how dumb they are. You will be embarrassed to be Irish.
Oh, I want to see all this shit now.
Okay.
Right, so I'm going to be embarrassed to be Irish at the end of this. What were you thinking? I'm only joking. Look, context, that was fun. That was good fun. You were speaking to some Irish guys in a podcast. It was great fun, right?
I had a series of Irish podcasts where the guys really were dumb, and I generalized and I stereotyped and I made that comment. So yeah, we were having a lot of fun. But just getting back to what I was saying, why are we talking about this? Why is it important? Well, I'm going to tie those two things together. Right now, with all of the conflicts in the world, wars and fighting over resources and everything, there's only two things that all of the countries in the world agree upon. One of them is everyone needs to get the lethal injection, and two, nobody is allowed to independently explore Antarctica, which is the one thing that would prove that we're not on a globe. So that's interesting. So let's dive in.
Tell me about that. Hang on. Tell me about this. People are not allowed to explore Antarctica. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so in 1940s and 50s, they started exploring Antarctica. Admiral Byrd did his famous Project High Jump, and he went out. He said he went beyond the South Pole, and he discovered land bigger than the United States, filled with resources. No people have ever seen it, no step foot upon it. No animals, no plants, just empty, just resources in the middle of nowhere. And then all of a sudden the Antarctic Treaty was signed. Eventually all the countries in the world, all the major countries in the world signed it, and nobody can go there. And people say, well, let me Google that. And you Google it just like Googling our vaccine safe, right? And you get, oh yeah, there's 100 different companies that will take you there. Those 100 companies, Richie, are run by the same guy, right? And they're overpriced, and they only take you to this little peninsula called Deception Island. Interesting, right next to Rothschild Island, I think. And they don't show you anything except some ice and penguins, and they kick you out. No one's allowed to explore the outer lands, the outer space of Antarctica.
How could they be stopped, though, Dave? I mean, if you had your own seaworthy vessel that could travel like that, who's going to stop you and say, hey, you can't? Go on.
I will tell you. So there's 8 islands. One of them is the Falkland Islands, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Why are we fighting over the Falkland Islands? And they all have military bases on it, run by the Crown, and they guard it. They They're in charge of that section of the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean, I think, is bigger than all of the other oceans combined, and no one's allowed to go there. The Southern Ocean is all of the water outside of 60 degrees south. That's a massive area, and no one's allowed to go there. You can't even see Antarctica from 60 degrees south, okay? And then they have networks of buoys out there. There was some fishermen a few years ago that went out across there, and they were stopped by a destroyer, right? There's also people that have gotten permission from their countries to explore Antarctica. When they got there, they were stopped. Excuse me, they were turned around, they were sent home, and their ships were taken from them. They were lost their licenses, and they were put in jail. I mean, if you look into the Antarctic Treaty, they say, oh, yeah, you can go to Antarctica. Just fill out this paperwork, spend up to $2 million in permit fees, and then when we deny you, we keep your money. Okay, so again, Richie.
That would fascinate me now. That would fascinate me, people having their vessels confiscated. And if that's true, look, I've got to take a lot of what you say at face value, because as much as I've done as much research as I possibly can in the last few days, this is your area of research. It's not mine. I couldn't get anybody to come on and have a proper debate with you. I did see you debate a guy on YouTube, and I thought he was incredibly rude. The guy, I thought it was pretty shabby, to be honest. I didn't like that.
And there's a breakdown of that and showing just really, he's just all ad homs and straw man arguments. He really did nothing other than embarrass the scientific community, but he's not even a scientist. He's a failed musician.
I don't like that. Yeah, it's not the way I do. Yeah. It's not the way I do business. So can I say this? Because look, it's already 10 past, and we're going to go till about 5 minutes at the top of the hour. I'm going to tell you where I am, and then I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you speak. As far as I understand it, the Earth is round. Now there is a funny caveat there. I'm very open to the simulation model, that the world we live in is a simulation. We'll park that, because that might not be something you're particularly interested in getting into. But over the years, it has come up once or twice. Richie, what do you think of flat Earth? What I say, this is what I go on. I know you're going to laugh. The live feed from the International Space Station, which shows the curvature of the Earth, right? Stop laughing. The thousands of satellite pictures that we have of Earth taken by all manner of satellites. Stop laughing, I said. You'll get a chance to laugh in a minute, right? Gravity, we can get into that in a few minutes as well. Something which you've been accused of in the past, which I'm not accusing you of, but it is a real thing. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. A lot to do with people who wouldn't be learned experts on subjects, but who come to believe that they're experts because they've got a computer and they've gone on to Google. Again, we might talk about that later on. But just on the NASA stuff, the space station, and everybody else who's ever gone up there, and I've even spoken to pilots. Now, look, I'm not going to lie. I've not gotten into too many chats with pilots about the curvature of the Earth, but I have heard from pilots, and I have no reason to think they're lying. They say, look, what they see when they're up very, very, very high is a curved Earth. Now, you don't agree with any of this. Why?
Richie, let me jump in here. Okay, there are many, many, many pilots that know. All of the Qantas pilots, those are the ones out of Australia. They all know. They tell us that they're not allowed to talk about it publicly. I actually spoke with an American Airlines pilot last night. And I'm having a private call with him and another major captain because they're afraid to come out, but they want to learn more about it. When you're flying an airplane, you just believe because Bill Nye, the line guy with the bow tie, told you, oh, the Earth is too big to see the curvature, but we can see boats go over the curvature. And so pilots are just flying. GPS is flying the plane. They take off and land. That's it. They're not navigating anything. No one brings a globe into the cockpit and goes, we're going from here to here. Southern flights prove the Earth is flat. They make no sense on the globe. They make perfect sense on a flat Earth. They're going from Santiago to Australia. You go all the way up to America, all the way over to Dubai or to China, and then all the way back down. That makes no sense. On the globe, you would just go across the bottom, even around Antarctica, since we're not allowed to fly over Antarctica. But it makes no sense. You look at it on a flat Earth map, it's a straight line. It's a straight line from one end to the other. And the other thing is people say, well, they have to go, they stop, they have hubs, they have to pick up people. Well, there's a thing that's happening quite often now called emergency landings, where people, emergency plane has to land. And when the plane lands, it lands in an airport that is nowhere near the flight path that they're taking. And they get there incredibly fast. I have tons of examples of this. There's a book called 16 Emergency Landings Proving Flat Earth. And they all make sense because the airport that they landed at is literally on a straight line between the origin and the destination every single time.
This is interesting. So again, I can't.
Let me just throw this out. Let me just throw this out. So people, if you're looking for the information, flatearthdave.com. Get around the Google censorship. FlatEarthDave.com. You have my interviews channel there, my all my social media, all my short videos, my crash course in the middle of the page called Crash Course. I challenge anybody. There's a bunch of videos there. You can't get through 3 of them before realizing that you don't live on a globe. And I offer 3,000 ounces of silver or 3 Bitcoins for anybody that can come up with one proof of the globe.
Remind us of the website. I was going to do it anyway, but remind us of the website address again.
It's FlatEarthDave.com. That's the easiest one to remember. It actually points to the FlatEarthPodcast.com, but FlatEarthDave.com. That's me, Flat Earth Dave, FlatEarthDave.com. Everything's there. Now, I have an app that will bypass the algorithms. The problem is right now on the app as of today, we're having a little problem. Google just updated their operating system, and the app is having a major issue, but that's going to be fixed in 24 hours. So if you want to buy the app for Apple, no problem. If you want to get it for Android, just wait a day, please.
Half the planet is dark now, and half of it is in daylight. Why is that? If the Earth was flat, wouldn't the sun illuminate the entire surface at the same time?
That's actually not true. The first thing you said, it's not half. There's certain times of year where more of the globe is lit, more of the world. I said globe, just from indoctrination.
I'm not going to pull you up on it.
Sometimes it's less. If it was a globe, it would always be 50-50. And again, the day and night cycles on the app under the frequently asked questions page, there's a day and night button. There's seasons. Seasons actually prove the Earth is flat. But think about this. If you were in a giant room, a long, big, room, like 100, 200, 300 yards long, and you got a light and you held it a couple feet over the floor on one end of this dark room, it would light up just that area of the room. The other end of the room wouldn't have any light, except you would be able to see the light. But the problem is on the world stage, right? The world is a stage. We have the atmospheric layer in between us and the celestial lights above them, with us being below that atmospheric layer, and it literally blocks it. I have tons of videos called Where Does the Sun Go? And I show you. But here's the thing. Do not believe anything I tell you. Go and verify this stuff yourself. Richie, we all have the same story, and you're going to have the same story. We heard about flat Earth. We said it was ridiculous. We railed on it. We didn't take the time to look at it. But then we looked, and then we tried to disprove it. And then we realized, holy moly, the Earth is not a spinning ball. A spinning ball flying through space is scientifically impossible. Well, think about this, Richie. This is what you have to believe. You're on a rock, a lumpy rock that's surrounded by water that magically turns spherical, surrounded by spherical air adjacent to a void, a vacuum, adjacent without a barrier, flying through space in 4 different directions at once at speeds that you can't even fathom. And somehow all the water just sticks to the ball and everything works. And someone in Australia is standing antipodal to me. Our feet are facing each other. None of that makes any sense.
But it's gravity, doesn't it? But it's gravity, isn't it? And
gravity is a theory. Hold on. Gravity is a theory. When you have a theory, Richie, and it doesn't work, you throw it out. But gravity didn't work. And they said, well, we need to replace gravity with 96% dark matter and dark energy. 96%, something they've never seen. And they say, well, we have to replace it because without it, it doesn't work. Therefore, it has to exist. That's called pseudoscience. Here's the thing. There is a thing called the electrostatic charge. That's a provable thing. The Earth has a negative or neutral charge, and the air, the sky, has a positive charge. Positive and negatives attract to each other. So anything above the ground has that positive charge, and the ground's not moving, so it says down is this way. This is what science tells us, that the electrostatic charge is 10 to, I think, the 38th power more powerful than gravity. That's a number that's so ridiculous. Let's say it's just 10 to the 10, 10 to the 5. Doesn't even matter. More powerful than gravity. So let's pretend, and we have to really pretend, gravity's real. And I hold an apple or a microphone, as Neil deGrasse Tyson, the failed actor, did, and I drop it. It's going to go down. The electrostatic force is millions of times stronger than gravity. So how can you claim it's gravity?
It's gravity. If I jump up, because if I jump in the air, I'm going to come down, I'm going to land, I'm going to hit the ground on my feet. If I jump off a building, I'm going to hit the ground, I'm going to die.
Well, that's because you're more dense than the air around you, and you have a positive charge, and the ground is negative. So you have that, buoyancy and density. Buoyancy and density sort everything else out, right? The gravity force, the downward force is such a weak force. I don't think it's barely measurable, but it says, hey, down is this way. On the app, under the frequently asked questions, hit the gravity button, and all of the videos are there to show you the experiments, to show you how we can defy gravity or electrostatic
hang on.
Changing the electrostatic force.
Speaking about the experiments now, FlatEarthDave.com. Flat Earth Dave is on the show this evening. It's really interesting stuff. on the experiments, I remember a few years ago, I read about this, and then I checked it out, because I don't believe it, I read in the paper, so I check it out. There was a YouTube group called Globebusters. You remember these people, I'm sure you know them.
They're still out on Sundays,
yeah,
every Sunday.
And they took a ring laser gyroscope, and they made a big deal of this, they made a big event out of it,
yes.
and they said, no, you're not going to cut me off, Dave. No, we don't do that, my friend. No, we do not do that.
My bad.
You're very bad. Let me ask the question before you jump all over it. And don't give me this, because I saw this with my own eyes. They said, we've got a ring laser gyroscope. We will be able to show you that the Earth isn't rotating. And what happened was they proved the opposite. They were able to actually detect the 15 degree an hour rotation of the Earth. That happened, and I did see that. And they looked a bit embarrassed about it.
Yeah. So what you saw was an edited film by a bunch of anti-flat earthers that went out and did a hit piece. And there's two things they did in that video. One, they showed Bob, from Globebusters go, hey, we showed about a 15 degree hour drift. He goes, let's not tell the Globers about this because they'll run wild. And then they cut it. That's all they showed in the movie. Now, the truth was, they said, okay, there is a 15-hour drift. Now, what is it? Is it the Earth spinning or is it the ether spinning? So there has to be another experiment. So they did another experiment. They took at the same latitude, they went to the top of a mountain in Denver, I believe, and they tested it from up there. And from up there, if the Earth was spinning, it would be 15 degrees per hour perfectly, just like it is on the ground. But it wasn't. It was different. So that unequivocally proves that it's the sky, the ether, whatever you want to call the sky, that was spinning and not the Earth. It unequivocally proves it. Okay?
I don't buy
they didn't
that,
put that
Dave.
in the movie. They didn't put that in the movie.
I don't buy. Well, I have to take your word for it, and I'd have to take their word for it, and I've got to be a skeptic because I'm a journalist. I have to be skeptical.
Absolutely.
Look, skydivers.
Let me just tell people where to find that. Just on the app under the debunking the debunkers, there's a whole bunch of videos showing you all of the experiments, showing you how you're being deceived, showing you how Nat Geo lies about curvature over a lake. But go ahead, skydivers.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many people have done high altitude, low opening jumps. We've had people in high flying aircraft. There's been so many of them, and they've photographed this stuff. Bezos, and look, I'm not saying that people should start trusting Jeff Bezos, but he was taken up there, wasn't he? He comes down, unless he's the greatest actor that ever lived. I mean, the guy is absolutely bawling. He's bawling his eyes out. He can't believe it, and he describes what he saw. This beautiful ball, this beautiful globe. They can't all be lying, Dave.
Yeah, they are. They are
lying.
lying.
For what? Like what game?
Some of them are fooled. Like, hold on a second. So people say, "Oh, we see it from an airplane," and so we send, then we say, "Well, you can't see it from an airplane." And we prove that the horizon's flat when you use a regular lens. So then they say, "Oh, well, you have to see it from a jet fighter, at 70,000 feet." And then we showed how one of their cameras wasn't fisheye, and it showed a level, horizontal, almost eye level horizon. And then they're like, well, you have to go higher than that. So we sent a balloon up to 120,000 feet without a fisheye lens, and it showed a perfectly flat, uncurving horizon. And now Neil deGrasse Tyson, the failed actor, says that they've moved the globe posts again and again, that you have to go higher than 120,000 feet. Well, no one's jumping from above 120,000 feet except Felix Baumgartner on the Red Bull jump. I think he went from 127,000 feet, and he said he saw the curvature, but they did 2 test flights before the one that they aired, and they didn't use GoPros, and it showed a level horizon. So again, we have the videos, we have them filmed, we show you how the horizon, like from the space station and from everywhere else, it's always changing. It's really tight, it's a ball, then it's convex, and it's flat, it's all over, and that's because they're using fisheye lenses. And this is a deception to imprison your mind.
You talked about this fisheye lenses. I'm going to drag out something in a minute from physics.com where they explain this fisheye lens phenomenon, where they claim to explain it. But with the greatest respect to you, and I am giving you the greatest respect because I think you're an amiable guy, I think you're a bright guy, but I don't agree with this. Let me give you a couple of other things that I can't get my head around. Look, we're not talking about thousands. We're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who've seen the Earth from space, and I'm not saying they swear by it, but they come back telling these stories of what they've seen. It's wonderful. We've had, I can't think of his name, Tim Peake, British astronaut on the space station. He did live feeds for Sky News when he was up there, and he pointed the camera out the window. It all looks pretty genuine to me, Dave.
Yeah, it does, but it's not. And here's the thing. On the app as NASA, the only space agency, we have caught them again and again and again. How many times, like if I was showing you undeniable footage on the space station that they're using a green screen, undeniable footage that they're hanging from harnesses and sometimes those harnesses fail, undeniable proof that they're using augmented reality and you're not looking at real physical objects. If I showed you that one time, 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times, how many times would it take for you to go, okay, it's all a lie, right? And it is all a lie. When you look at the physics of space, right, they're in a tin can in a vacuum. Why doesn't it explode? Right? You can't have high pressure next to low pressure. NASA has the Sandusky, I think it's called the vacuum chamber, and they can't even make a full vacuum like space. And the walls are 11 feet thick with steel and concrete. Okay. None of that makes any sense. It doesn't work in physics. In reality, pseudoscience is space. Space doesn't exist the way they tell us. I mean, the closest star, is 25 trillion miles. Your brain can't fathom that, Richie. I heard you say earlier that you weren't good at math, but 25 trillion miles, if you're traveling 100,000 miles an hour, it would take you 28,000 years to get to the closest star.
But quantum physics, look, I certainly don't understand mathematics, but I bet you and me are pretty equal when it comes to quantum physics. I can't get my head around it, but I'm fascinated by the notion that the stars we see, the light emanating from the stars, these are stars that have blown up millions and millions of years ago. And that's what I find all this stuff infinite. I can't understand why anybody would make this stuff up. Why? What's the game?
So let me answer those two questions. Those are the two best questions, right? So when they tell us these stars are such distances away, but you don't understand there's a thing called the inverse square law of light. It's very simple. As light expands out, it spreads out. And so every time you double the distance to the light, that light is spread out 1/4 of the brightness, okay? So there's a serious brightness issue of these stars, right? And if you do the math, and I do it in all my interviews, just check that out on flatearthdave.com, go to the interviews. I do it in almost every interview when I'm doing a video interview. I show you how if Polaris was 2 light days away, Polaris, our North Star, they tell us it's 48 times bigger than our sun, and we do some calculations. You couldn't see it at 2 light days away, and they tell us it's 433 light years away. These are inconceivable things. These are things that are scientifically provable that you could not see a star at these minimum distances away, and they tell us that they're ridiculous, distances away, and that we're looking at light from billions of years ago. That's nonsense. That's pseudoscience.
Hang on. The opposite is true, I think. The opposite is true. It is scientific fact that you cannot prove a negative. You can't prove that this is impossible. You might say it's improbable, but you hang on. No. You mentioned. Let me ask you this. You're having a great say now, so let me jump in. You mentioned Polaris. There's another one. If you're in the northern hemisphere, if you're north, much further north of the UK, and you're looking at Polaris, right? So it's nearly directly above the North Geographic Pole, right? You can see it in northern latitudes, let's call it that. But if you start to travel south then, towards the equator, the star will sink lower and lower and lower towards the horizon. That's a fact. And that must be blocked by the curvature of the Earth. It must be.
So this is what we were told. This is what we were all programmed to believe. But I'm going to explain to you in 2 seconds how it actually works. But you said before, just back to the astronauts real quick, there's only been less than 600 people that have allegedly been into space. So not tens of thousands. So when you're standing under a street light, you're on a straight road and you got a whole bunch of street lights and you're standing under a street light. Let's call that your noon sun or even Polaris or whatever. And then you look down the road, a half a mile, quarter mile down the road, the lights are now at your eye level. And 2 miles down the road, you can't even see the lights because they've merged with the horizon. Well, that's how we see stars. In the north, Polaris is high in the sky because Polaris is in the north. Polaris is the center of the flat Earth circle. So if as we go south, farther away, it gets lower in the sky, just like a street light would get lower in the sky, lower in the sky. And here's the thing. If the Earth was a globe, you could not see Polaris beyond the equator, but Polaris has been spotted as far as 30 degrees south. That is scientifically impossible. That is provably impossible, okay? And the global argument to that is, it's refracting up and stopping at eye level. Nonsense. It's just going farther away. If you're standing in a hallway in Vegas, like the Bellagio, the lights at the other end of the hall are merging with the floor. It's called perspective. And again, where does the sun go on the frequently asked questions on the app? And then you'll understand how this works. This is stuff that they don't teach us in school.
Let me put another couple of questions from me. These are my gotcha questions.
No problem. And make sure we have time at the end for the why the lie, because that's the important
No,
one.
we're going to go to that in a few minutes because time is flying away from us. And I do want to read comments because lots of comments, they're flowing into my website. When they build big structures, by they I mean when governments and cities decide to build big structures, in some cases they must take into account the curvature of the Earth. You'll probably have heard this one before, but this is another one that I can't get my head around, and I think this trumps your argument. And this is the Humber Bridge in Yorkshire. This is very important, right? Now, the Humber Bridge is an amazing structure. I'm sure there are bigger and broader bridges in the United States, but we're little old England here. It's a lovely bridge, right? So it has 2 towers. Both of them are vertical, and they were kept 36 millimeters or 1.4 inches further apart at the top than they were kept apart at the bottom. And that's down to the Earth's curvature. It has to be.
No, it doesn't. I'll explain why. So the center of the bridge is pulling on those towers. So obviously you would lean them away. We have our new Tappan Zee Bridge here, which has the towers leaning extremely far apart. But we have the same thing with the Verrazano Narrows Bridge here, where the top, it's like 3 centimeters or 30 centimeters, whatever it is, apart. That's just how they build it. And we have a beautiful photo on a calm day, an orthographic view, and the towers are leaning away, but the water underneath it is perfectly level. Okay, that's just how they build bridges. Why would you build 2 parallel structures when everything's pulling towards the center? You would lean them away from each other.
Yeah, but these are amazing engineers, and they say the reason we're doing this is not because it's pulling from the center. They say it's because of the curvature. Now, hang on, there's loads of questions. Let me put these questions. I'm being fair now.
No problem.
Harry and Pennywise. Harry says, Richie, please ask David, if the sun on a flat Earth model is meant to rotate around the Arctic Circle at a fixed radius, how come in December people in Melbourne experience a southwesterly sunset setting towards the direction of Antarctica? That's a good bloody question.
That is a complex question, but we've completely answered it with the way optics in the sky works. There's a guy named Walter Bislin, who's a globe believer, who built a model on his website that shows us how we view the sun. And he tried to do it to prove the globe, but it actually shows us exactly how flat Earth works. And again, on a radio show, almost impossible.
Yeah,
but again, on
Flatearth.com.
in the app under where does the sun go? It's all listed there, and under seasons also.
And Penny, thanks for being brief with these answers too. I appreciate that. And there will be some people who think that Dave is absolutely brilliant. He's a genius. There will be others listening who think Dave is bonkers, and they might be annoyed because I'm not jumping all over Dave. I don't have the knowledge to do that. All I can do is put to him what scientists have said. He answers. I can't come back at him other than what I've said at the top of the show. To me, in my opinion, let me put this to you. Pennywise, flatearthdave.com. You're listening to David Weiss. Is it Weiss or Weiss, David?
Weiss like ice.
Ah, right. Yeah, Weiss, yeah.
Weiss.
Weiss,
like
Weiss.
ice.
Excuse me, Weiss.
W,
Yeah.
Weiss.
W, Weiss.
David Weiss.
Pennywise says, Richie, again, this is the two. He asks about the rainbow being curved, but before you answer that, he says, why is the rainbow curved? Let me also put to you, why in an eclipse of the moon, a lunar eclipse, is the circle that moves from one side of the moon to the other around? The only possible explanation for that, surely, is that it's pointed towards a sphere. Why else would the shadow be circular? That and the rainbow. Go ahead.
So real quick on the moon eclipse, the idea of a round Earth casting a shadow on another sphere 238,000 miles away is ridiculous. You can't even cast a shadow with a single source light of like a basketball on a wall 20 feet away. So shadows don't work that way.
Yeah, but the sun.
When you hold on. Let me explain.
Massive.
So during a lunar eclipse, the Earth is supposedly getting in between the sun and the moon, right? But there's been many eclipses where the sun and the moon are both visible above the horizon. And not only that, the eclipse starts, the shadow, the darkening of the moon comes in from the top, okay, instead of the bottom. So when you look at that, when you look at the models of it, it makes no sense. It's called the Seleninian eclipse. There's been over 50 of them, and they're globe killers, if you ask me.
Before we turn to why they would do it, because that's the fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly run down a few comments. from our listeners here. I think they're happy you're on, Dave. Isabel asks about the flat Earth theory. Does Dave then think that all the other planets in our solar system are flat too, or non-existent?
Yeah. So think about this. If you look up and look up at the stars, Jupiter is one of the brightest lights in the sky next to, other than the moon. It's been in the sky recently. It's still up there. If you look out tonight, it'll be up there. And it looks like it's as bright as the sun. It's literally as bright as the sun. So you have to believe that, if you were on Jupiter, the sun is much farther away. So you'd have a smaller sun than we see. That little star-sized sun is lighting up the gases on Jupiter, which are non-reflective. They're reflecting back to Earth, ignoring the inverse square law of light, and looking as bright as the sun from our eyes. Again, scientifically impossible. And again, as far as other planets all being round, you know what? They kind of look round to me, but I don't know what they are. I don't even think they're physical. I think Mars is, they could be energetic things. One quick thing. Let me just throw this about Jupiter. Take 15 seconds. Okay. They tell us Jupiter is the biggest planet and it has more gravity than all of the other planets in our solar system combined. Well, Jupiter is made mostly of hydrogen and helium. Guess what? Hydrogen and helium defy gravity. So how much hydrogen and helium does it take to create gravity? Right. And the other thing is, if you take a helium balloon and let it go and drop a feather, the feather is going to go down, the balloon's going to go up. So feathers are heavier. So you're telling me if you had a Jupiter-sized bundle of feathers, it's more gravity than all of the other planets combined? Again, when you look into planets, you find out that it's all brainwashing. There are no terra firma planets.
I never studied physics. Let me read a few more comments before we get to the whys. Mark says, what happens in the sky is a red herring. We're talking about the ground we're standing on. Colin says, what difference does it make? Social credit system, digital currency, and the tyranny. He says that. William says, in his opinion, you can't be using space station footage to prove anything. NASA are masters of deception, says William. John says, the only flat Earth model is full exploration. No one knows the full dimensions, he says. Let's scroll down. John has got some very interesting points here. John has a telescope. I know John. John's an Irish guy, and just like every other Irish guy, he's not stupid, Dave. Just thought I'd point that out. John has a telescope. He says, I can see moons orbiting Jupiter. I can even see the round shadows cast by moons on the surface. In Australia, the moon is upside down. That can be explained by a globe, but complicated to explain if the Earth is flat. The moon would have to turn as it rotates. Why would it do that?
Let me answer that one.
Hang on. In a telescope, the moon is clearly spherical, says John. Good points. Go ahead.
Yeah. So real quick, under the moon button on the app and in all my videos, I show 4 examples of the moon, and you can't tell which one's spherical and which one's not, and 3 of them aren't. As far as the moon being upside down, let's say you and I are in a big room, right? We got 10-foot-high ceilings, and we tape a moon to the ceiling in the center, and I'm at one end of the room and you're at the other, and we both look at the moon. One of them, you're going to see the moon upside down to me, and that's just how it works across the flat plane, right? So, and the other thing is the moon circles around in between the 2 tropics, and as it does, it kind of wagon wheels, and depending on your latitude, it turns at a different rate, and that's exactly how something circling above a flat plane would operate.
This is theory now. This is theory, Dave. This is a theory.
No, it's not theory.
It's a theory.
It's not.
Come on.
Again, the motions of the lights in the sky are no way to prove the shape of the Earth. We can see too far. Large bodies of water at rest need lateral pressure, okay? And they're testably, measurably, scientifically, provably flat. We can see too far. We can see so far that the Earth, we've seen ships that if the Earth was a sphere, the radius of the Earth would need to be 380,000 miles when they tell us the radius is less than 4,000, okay? We can see too far. That's what woke me up. That's what made me start looking. Okay. And you can go out and do this stuff yourself. Go out and get a telescope. Go out and get a super zoom camera. Zoom in on things across calm water, not wavy water, calm water. And you will see that there's things that should be a mile below the curve that you can see.
Yeah, but
right?
But scientists have said that what you're actually seeing is a mirage. Now, you know this, especially over water. So, it's a mirage you're seeing.
100%. So there's the famous picture here in America across Lake Michigan.
I did my homework, Dave.
Chicago, and it's 50 miles away, and they said, oh, it's a mirage. So a couple of our guys got in a boat. They zoomed in, like, there's Chicago, and then they drove 50 miles across the lake, keeping it in the film the whole time, and it never changed. If it was a mirage, it would morph out. It would disappear. But it didn't. It's not a mirage. That's what they use. They use pseudoscience to just claim, flat Earth, actually scientific claims. Again, We don't know exactly what's here. We don't know what's beyond the shoreline of Antarctica. Maybe there's more land, just like Admiral Byrd said. Maybe there's more ponds out there. Like our world is a pond. The shoreline of our pond is Antarctica that holds the water in. Maybe there's more ponds out there. If we lived on a giant plane and you had other pieces of the plane, you know what you call a piece of the plane? A planet.
Let me have
the plane.
Let me back in because I've got two more comments to read out, and then keep an eye on the clock now because we're going to go to about 5 minutes too, and I'll cut you off then because I'll have to get out for the show. It's great to have you on flatearthdave.com. Lovely to meet you, Dave, genuinely, and you're very welcome to this parish. Cooksey says, I'm laughing my ass off here. Buoyancy and density. You can literally do a gravity test with a bowling ball. Look it up. Before you answer that, Brenda says, Richie, please ask Dave the following. What's on the underside of this flat earth? What solid shape does he believe the earth is? A disc, inverted pyramid, cuboid, etc. So if you want to answer those quickly, that'll give us 10 minutes then to answer why would they lie. Go ahead.
Yes. So what's under the earth? How would I know? Because the deepest hole ever dug was in Russia. It's just short of 8 miles. It's called the Great Borehole. And while they were drilling it, they were using ground penetrating radar to see what they were going to hit next. And they were wrong every step of the way. Then they hit an impenetrable barrier and they couldn't get through it. They tried for years and years and years and couldn't. Then it was like, okay, well, even though we were wrong for the first 7.5 miles, we know what the next 4,000 miles is. And we know that there's a molten magnetic core. A molten magnetic core. They're laughing at us because you can't have a molten magnet. You heat a magnet up, it loses its magnetism before it even melts.
And what about Brent? Oh, sorry, you answered that, yeah. And as to the previous point, I bloody well lost that there now, about the bowling ball.
Oh, the bowling ball. So buoyancy and density, absolutely. We don't deny buoyancy and density. A bowling ball is heavier than a feather. It falls faster. Okay, it falls heavier. It lands on your foot. It hurts. And that's because of density, right? If you look on the periodic table, every element that's more dense than the other one has a stronger positive charge to it. And the more the charge, the more it goes down towards the earth. And that's it. Buoyancy and density, we're not denying it. MIT came out with a thing called the silent drone. They got a drone. It looks like a skid, like a big pallet, and it flies, no moving parts, no sound. All they do is change the electrostatic charge of it, and it could fly around through the air silently. Okay? That's not defying gravity. That's defying the electrostatic, provably scientifically provable force.
We have 15 minutes from here. I'm really interested I'm pretty much interested in everything. That's why I got into radio, right? Why? What would be the payoff? I can understand some of the bigger lies. I can understand. You might say they're not bigger lies, but I can understand lies about climate change and climate crises. Yep. I can understand lies about pandemics because they want to transform the way we live and make life into a virtual prison. Why lie about this? If it was flat, why not say it's flat?
Because the lie is to keep your mind in a prison. The heliocentric model is I call it the matrix. It's a prison for your mind. So think about this. We live in this giant pond surrounded by Antarctica. And what's beyond Antarctica? Maybe there's other lands, more lands, extra territory. If somebody came from the extra territory from the outer space, they might be considered an extraterrestrial from outer space. Scientifically possible. We don't know what's beyond the shoreline of Antarctica. We want the right to go explore out there. We don't know what's above as high as we can get, which is about 120,000 feet. We don't know. And we have the liars at NASA, the proven liars at NASA, that we can, once you understand that they're lying, then you have to discount everything they do. NASA admits they don't have any photos of Earth. They just have images. They're made in Photoshop, a whole thing. So why the lie? If they can convince you that you're not divine, that you're not at the center of creation, that you're flying through random space, you're insignificant, you could be taken out by an asteroid, we're one of trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of other worlds, you give up your God-given divinity. You give up your power, and that's what the thing that the elite don't want. They don't want us knowing that we are at the center of creation. They don't want us knowing that nobody has control over us. They don't want us knowing that we are divine, that our thoughts create our reality. They don't want us knowing that there's no shortage of resources. There's no shortage of water. There's no overpopulation. They want us living in fear of everything. That's how they can control us. They control us with the news, Richie. News, north, east, west, south. They steer our mind with the news, and they put headlines on us, right? The worry lines in our forehead. They're literally controlling our minds through fear. They don't want us knowing who we are. They don't want us knowing their power. They don't want us challenging them, because the truth is, Richie, if everyone in the world heard this podcast today and they checked out flatearthdave.com, they took the crash course for free in the middle, downloaded the app, whatever, then they would say, you know what, screw the government. And then guess what? All the governments would be gone, because the only power the government has is in our imagination. They're hiding technology. They're hiding free energy from us. They're hiding everything that would make us free. They're hiding the ability for us to explore beyond the fence that they put around us. They took the edge of Antarctica and they squished it down into an imaginary continent at the bottom of the ball. And they told us, hey, Truman, there's nothing else to discover. We've discovered everything, when the truth is the world could be infinitely larger than we know here. If people that are waiting for disclosure is here. It's on Earth in the extra territory. I believe that there's extra territory out there. I can't prove it, but we want to go prove it. We want the ability to go prove it. But even if there's not, we're in the center of creation. We're not a random accident.
I've got a couple of points on this. Bruce says, this was something I was going to put to you myself towards the end. Bruce says, look, listening to Dave, everything is a lie or a scam except his own evidence. Now, do you check yourself regularly for that? You sound like a bright guy. I mean, you're a comic, you're a successful businessman, you're very articulate. Do you check your own bias? I mean, confirmation bias is a real thing. Are you excluding that from your field of vision, which doesn't suit your narrative, and resorting sometimes? I mean, he does say, Bruce, he says, look, I understand why Professor Dave got rude to Flat Earth Dave. He was exasperated because everything he said, you just came back with it's a lie or a scam. I mean, do you keep an eye on that, Dave?
Well, absolutely. And again, calling Dunning-Kruger and calling confirmation bias, that's absolutely not true at all. I am the most, I look into everything. If I see something that absolutely proves flat Earth, I question the heck out of it. I'm like, wait a minute, let me check that out. Wait a minute. What's going on here? And there's lots of false evidence, and we don't bring that forward. Again, anything beyond Antarctica is speculation, but we don't need to go beyond Antarctica to test that the Earth is not moving. We're not spinning and whirling and twirling at speeds that are unimaginable. We are stationary. All of the stars in the sky, we're in this beehive universe, right? We're spinning around, going all around, but all of the stars will reset. I challenge everybody, go out tonight, take a picture of the stars from a specific spot in your yard, and then put a note in your calendar, do the same thing next year or in 10 years, okay? Every single star will be in the same place. But we're traveling 4.5 billion miles a year, never returning to where we were before. All of the other stars are moving in all of their different positions, and none of the stars ever change. Richie,
let me come back
together.
Let me come back on that, because I've got to pick you up on something. Yes. You mentioned the Earth spinning again. Now, Bruce said that your answer to a scientific point is often it's a conspiracy theory or it's fake news. I pointed out to you earlier on, and I looked into this, and it's my belief that this was genuine. The Globe Busters took a gyroscope to try and show that the Earth wasn't rotating, and it did the opposite. It showed that it was moving 15 degrees per hour, and your response to that was to give me some look, I hate to do this because I do a lot of conspiracy research. I agree with everything you said about the elites and about what they have planned for us, every word of it. But in that instance, I say the gyroscope test had failed and made them look embarrassed, and you came back with they were stitched up. That's not scientific, Dave.
No. That's where you're incorrect. You're uninformed, and we were all uninformed at a time. So there's other experiments like the Michelson and Morley experiment. All of these experiments, Einstein himself said that there's no optical experiment that you can do that can prove if we're spinning or the ether is spinning around us. That there's no way to prove if the Earth is spinning or the sun is moving around us. Okay, so we did the experiment. We're like, okay, we don't know. We noticed a rotation of 15 degrees per hour for most of the day, right? So we did an experiment at altitude, which would prove one or the other, and it worked. You put those two together, it absolutely proved it. But most people just short circuit. They're like, well, the movie said it was that way, and therefore it has to be that way. It's not. We actually scientifically prove it. That is the scientific method. But people don't like using it because it takes time and effort. Richie, belief is the enemy of knowing. You said at the beginning of the show, I live in Connecticut. Do you know that I live in Connecticut, or do you believe it? Right?
I've read it on some of your bios, and
so does that
but you
make
probably
it
don't.
True?
No, of course not. No, but it's hang on. But that's relatively harmless, Dave. Give me a break. I mean, if I'm wrong, it's relatively harmless, right? That's a bit silly now for a bloke with your brain.
What I'm saying, it was just an example. I'm saying belief is the enemy of knowing. You have to go out and prove all things. You need to prove all things. Don't just believe it. Hey, it's coming from a credible guy. I do live in Connecticut. Why would I lie about that? But if something more important, like, hey, the guys at NASA are telling us all this stuff. Well, I caught NASA lying 100 times. Go watch my videos on my YouTube channel, DITRH, the NASA videos. You'll know that they're lying. They lie once.
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you where we have some common ground. Look, I'm not convinced. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm a man of my word. I'm going to find a scientist who isn't as rude as the Dave guy.
Beautiful.
I'll hand pick the gentleman or gentlewoman, even, not to be misogynistic. Yep. And as early as we can in the new year, I'll try and set it up with you. Because you've got a scattergun approach. You're like a machine gun there, barking out stuff at me, and I'm not criticising you for doing that. But this is not my field, so I'm not the best guy in the world. But I also don't want to have a situation where you've got somebody being rude and ad hominem attacks as you were subjected to previously. So I wouldn't allow that, not on this particular program. Yeah. So I'll do that. I'll set it up and we'll have a proper old debate about it. I'm not convinced. Look, I'm not glued to my positions on anything. I am not glued. Everything I've seen in the last 10, 20 years, I'm very open-minded to the simulation theory, which has been around 50 or 60 years, that this is, some sort of a computer construct. But that's, again, for another day. Tell you where we do have ground. This is going to sound silly if we're living in a simulation. I'll tell you where we do have common ground. I think the moon landing story is suspect, to say the least.
Oh, please.
Yeah, to say the least.
On the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app, click moon missions, and you'll see. It's all there. It's stuff that, Google will not serve you, but it's all there. And it just takes time. You can believe without doing any research, but if you want to know the truth, you need to research. You need to use discernment. You need to use the scientific method. You need to understand that men can lie. Many men can lie, but there's not as many as you think lying about them.
Why do you think they lied back in 1969? Was it just to beat the Russians to the moon, or was it for deeper reasons, as you've been explaining yourself in the last hour? It's basically,
it's all about control. Nobody died in the Cold War because I don't believe that there is this division between countries. They're all working together with a higher hand that we don't even know. So we have the puppets that lead all of our countries, but they're all being controlled by people that are probably living somewhere outside of the shoreline of Antarctica. I don't know. But there is, how is it that all the countries in the world agree to ignore all the resources in Antarctica and agree that everyone needs to get the experimental lethal injection? How does that happen? How do they agree on those two things? Yeah. That alone should make you look, Richie.
It's tyranny. If we leave flat Earth for the last couple of minutes that we have, and just briefly touch on what's going on around the world at the moment with mooted climate lockdowns, mooted social credit systems where everything you do will be measured. Your carbon output will be. It's beyond scary, isn't it? And I suppose the scariest thing is that most of the people we spend our time with, most of the people. You gave a very interesting interview to, I'm not sure if it was NBC, it was CNN, I think, back in 2017, 2018. You gave a really good interview and you talked very candidly about exploring flat Earth and the theories, and you said that you did lose some friends over it because they weren't tolerant, they weren't prepared to accept that you had a different opinion. And my God, are we seeing that now with the Great Reset agendas, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, the truth divides. The truth doesn't bring you together. The truth divides.
And how bad? I don't know how quickly, how rapidly this is happening. People think that by 2030, if the brakes are not applied to this, Dave, that life is going to be very, very strange and very uncomfortable if we don't prevent. Is 2030 a major year? Do you see it that way? This is a big year in this plan. I think
this year is a very big year. So here's the thing. You look at the Flat Earth community, right? On my app, there's over 84,000 people that are on what we call the Friend Finder. So you can actually reach out and contact people near you, like-minded people. All of those dots, 99.9% of them are unjabbed. And they're awake, aware people. They've all unplugged from the system. They no longer feed the beast, right? So why does Flat Earth matter? Because if everyone woke up to Flat Earth tonight, all of this is over. All of the jabs are over. All of the control of the government is over. All of the hidden technology, right? If you had a device that could power your house and power your car and heat your house and air condition your house, and it would last your entire life and it doesn't need to be refueled, wouldn't that be nice? Okay. Well, I believe that technology exists. I believe that all of this money that they extract from us, through extortion, they use that for these black projects for their own benefit. We don't see anything. We don't get any of that. They keep us sick and stupid and programmed with, stupid stuff on television, and they have us distracted, and they also have us protecting the lie, the prison. Talk about Stockholm syndrome. Most of the people that fight the flat earth don't even know their own model. They don't know that they're spinning 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. They don't know that they're orbiting 66,600 miles an hour. Funny number. They don't know that they're chasing the sun at over 500,000 miles per hour. They don't know that they're 4.5 billion miles from where they were a year ago, but none of the stars changed. They don't know any of that, but they'll defend it to the end because that's what they were brainwashed with from before they could even talk.
Yeah, but hang on. There's a lot of unbrainwashed people listening to this program, and they're open-minded and they've been listening to you. People with telescopes, and they see it entirely differently, and they're not seeing it entirely differently because they're brainwashed or they're stupid. It's because they're clever and they have deduced something different than you've deduced. We've got to be, fair about that. Not everybody is brainwashed. Very quickly, go on. Final word.
Yeah, so when you look at a light in the sky through a telescope, you're seeing a light in the sky. You can believe it's 1,000 miles away or 93 million miles away, but you have no way of determining that unless you know the distance or size. You can't determine that. So, years ago, they thought the sun was 3 million miles away. Now they thought it was 93 million miles away. They thought Polaris was 433 million miles away. Now they want to make it 333 million miles away. They're guessing. This is all nonsense. So when you look at a light in the sky, you don't know what it is. On my interviews, I show look at this sun. It looks beautiful. It's a beautiful ball sun. And then as it gets closer to you, you realize it's the front of a train and it's set up. The lights are in a big square, but for some reason it looks like a sphere from a distance. Again, optics, right? Once you see this stuff, once these tricks are shown to you, then you can never unsee it. Nobody becomes a flat earther and goes back. Nobody.
Listen,
period.
FlatEarthDave.com. First of all, thanks for coming on and sharing your time with us. I appreciate that. Thanks to Martin in Edinburgh, who demanded that we talk about this subject. FlatEarthDave.com. Get onto the website. Merry Christmas. I'll be in touch with you very early in the new year when I can nail down a scientist who'll be happy enough to come on and have a friendly chat about these issues. I've enjoyed your company, Dave. Cheers, pal.
Very good, Richie. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
You're very welcome. Flat Earth Dave in Connecticut. Dave, a businessman, he was a comedian. He was asked to look into, he did a conspiracy comedy show, which would have been, I think that would have been worth a watch, I think. And while he was doing that, his fans asked him to look into Flat Earth. He thought it was nonsense. He looked into it. Now he's convinced that the Earth is indeed flat. He's been explaining why to us on the programme today. Thanks to him for coming on. That is pretty much it for Wednesday's Richie Allen show. Yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on the time there. Yes, I've timed it beautifully for once. I'm useless lately with stopping it a little bit too early or a little bit too late to make the edit a bit easier. Anyway, I'm talking technical jargon now. It doesn't really matter. Again, thanks to Martin in Edinburgh for that. I will be speaking tomorrow. Can I say this?